I spotted the invitation on the kitchen counter one Thursday evening, buried under grocery receipts and school flyers for the kids. It had a glossy cover featuring a large bold heading, Franklin High School 15-year reunion. I picked it up, turning it over in my hand. "Did you know about this?" I called out to Emma, my wife of 10 years, who was upstairs wrangling our youngest into bed. "About what?" she shouted back, her voice muffled by the noise of a bedtime tantrum. "This reunion thing." She appeared a minute later, barefoot and a little frazzled, wiping her hands on the hem of her sweatshirt. "Oh yeah, that," she said with a laugh, brushing a loose strand of hair behind her ear. "Came in the mail a few days ago. Not sure if I'm going." "Why not?" I asked, leaning against the counter. "You loved high school, didn't you?" She shrugged. "I guess. Just feels weird to go back after all this time." I understood the sentiment. Nostalgia was a strange thing, often sweeter in memory than in reality. Still, Emma had always lit up when talking about her high school days. The basketball games, senior prom, the close-knit group of friends she swore she'd never lose touch with, but inevitably had. "You should go," I said, smiling encouragingly. "Might be fun." Emma hesitated, her lips pressing into a thoughtful line. "Maybe," she said finally. "We'll see." And with that, the conversation ended. But as the days passed, I noticed little signs that she was warming up to the idea. She spent more time scrolling through old photos on her phone, reminiscing about the past. There were sudden texts from friends whose names I barely remembered. Nicole, Sarah, even Cassie, the girl who had been her partner in crime during those wild teenage years. The reunion wasn't just pulling her back to high school memories. It was reviving old connections. The night before the event, Emma made the decision official. "I think I'll go after all," she announced while folding laundry in the living room. "Good," I said, genuinely happy for her. "Want me to come with you?" She smiled warmly but shook her head. "Nah, it's more of a solo thing. You'd probably be bored out of your mind." "Fair enough," I laughed. "Just don't forget to take embarrassing pictures of everyone." The next evening, she stood by the door, keys in hand, looking effortlessly stunning in a fitted black dress that hugged her figure perfectly. I hadn't seen her dress up like that in months, maybe even years. "You sure you're not trying to impress someone?" I teased lightly. She rolled her eyes but smiled. "Just myself," she quipped. I kissed her on the cheek. "Have fun." She left with a cheerful wave, the click of her heels echoing down the hallway. I didn't think much of it after that. The kids and I ordered pizza, watched a movie, and I put them to bed without incident. By the time Emma came home around midnight, I was half asleep on the couch. "Hey," she whispered, dropping her purse on the floor. "Hey," I mumbled groggily. "Good time?" She paused, a strange expression flickering across her face before she nodded. "Yeah, it was nice to see everyone." "Glad you went," I said, stretching before getting up. As she headed upstairs, I caught a faint whiff of perfume that wasn't hers. Something floral, subtle but distinct. I chalked it up to someone else's scent lingering from hugs and social closeness. After all, high school reunions were probably filled with people pretending they hadn't aged a day. It wasn't until a few weeks later that I had reason to remember that night more vividly. Emma had left her phone on the kitchen counter while running an errand. Normally, I never paid attention to her texts. Trust had never been an issue between us. But a notification caught my eye. New message. We really do have unfinished business. The sender's name was Ryan. I frowned. Ryan? The name triggered a faint memory. One of Emma's old high school boyfriends. She had mentioned him in passing over the years, always brushing it off as ancient history. Curiosity prickled at me. I wasn't a jealous husband by nature, but something about the message didn't sit right. Unfinished business was a phrase too loaded to be innocent. I picked up the phone, my heart thudding harder than I wanted to admit. The message thread opened with a single swipe, revealing a chain of texts that stretched back weeks, maybe even months. And what I read made the blood drain from my face. The text messages scrolled endlessly beneath my thumb, a growing timeline of conversations that should have never happened. At first, it was easy to convince myself there was nothing sinister here. The first few texts seemed innocent enough, polite exchanges between two old friends reconnecting after a decade and a half. "Ryan, it was so great seeing you last night. You still light up a room, you know? Emma. Lowell, well, you're still the same smooth talker, I see. Seriously, though, it was fun catching up. I tried to shake off the gnawing unease rising in my chest. I wanted this to be harmless, just nostalgic chatter between two people reminiscing about a simpler time. After all, people reconnect all the time. Wasn't that what reunions were for? But something about the tone, or maybe it was the timing of their messages, nagged at me. Conversations that had clearly continued long after the glow of the reunion night had faded. Ryan. Remember that time we snuck out of class junior year and drove to the lake? Emma. OMG, yes. You got us both detention for that. Ryan. Worth it. You were fearless back then. Emma. Haha, maybe a little reckless. I rubbed the back of my neck, my stomach tightening as I scrolled further. Their messages were littered with inside jokes, half-forgotten stories, and shared moments that painted a vivid picture of their past connection. Then the conversation took a different tone, one that made my pulse quicken. Ryan, do you ever think about what might have happened if we hadn't broken up? Emma, sometimes. I mean, we were kids back then, though. Life happens, Ryan. Still feels like unfinished business, don't you think? Unfinished business. My jaw clenched at the words. They hung in the air like an accusation, daring me to interpret them as anything but a warning sign. I kept scrolling, unable to stop myself despite the growing knot in my gut. I told myself it was just harmless banter, the kind of wistful, what-if conversations people have when they're bored or nostalgic. But as the messages went on, that theory became harder to believe. Ryan, seeing you again brought back so many memories, Emma. I get it. It's weird how that happens, isn't it? Ryan, not weird. Just real. Emma, lol, you always were a sentimental one. Ryan, nah, just honest. You were always the one who got away. There it was, the thinly veiled confession I hadn't wanted to find. My heart thudded heavily in my chest as I stared at the screen, the words burning into my brain. Emma, Ryan. I couldn't tell if that single response was hesitant or inviting. Either way, it was too much. My hands trembled as I set the phone down on the counter, my breathing shallow. Emma wasn't home yet, still out running errands, or so she'd said. I paced the kitchen, my thoughts spiraling out of control. We had built a life together, Emma and I, a decade of marriage, two beautiful kids, countless memories of laughter and love. She was my partner, my best friend. Trust had always been the foundation of our relationship, but now cracks were forming, jagged and impossible to ignore. When the front door opened a few minutes later, Emma walked in carrying a bag of groceries. She smiled when she saw me, but faltered slightly, her brow furrowing. Hey, she greeted cautiously, setting the bag on the counter. Everything okay? I forced a tight smile. Yeah, just thinking. Her eyes narrowed slightly, sensing something was off. You sure? Yep, I said, grabbing an apple from the counter. Long day, that's all. She didn't push further, and I was relieved. That night, as we lay in bed, I stared at the ceiling long after Emma had fallen asleep beside me. Her breathing was soft and even, a stark contrast to the chaos swirling in my mind. I wanted to believe there was a simple explanation for what I'd seen, that this was just harmless flirting, nothing more. But the phrase unfinished business echoed in my head, relentless and unyielding. I replayed the moments leading up to this discovery, searching for signs I might have missed. Had Emma been distant lately? Not really. She was still affectionate, still engaged with the kids. But now that I thought about it, there had been subtle changes. An uptick in her texting, random bursts of laughter at messages she never explained. And then there was that reunion night. The dress, the perfume that wasn't hers, the strange look on her face when she came home. Maybe I was reading too much into this. Maybe it was just my imagination running wild, or maybe it wasn't. The next morning, Emma showered while I made breakfast for the kids. My mind was still racing, torn between wanting answers and fearing what I might find. As Emma's phone sat unattended on the counter, temptation gnawed at me. I knew I shouldn't invade her privacy. Trust was sacred in a marriage, or at least it had been until now. But doubt had already taken root, and I couldn't shake it loose. So I did something I never thought I'd do. I unlocked her phone again and took screenshots of the entire conversation with Ryan. The screenshots burned a hole in my phone like a guilty secret waiting to be exposed. I didn't want to look at them, but I couldn't bring myself to delete them either. They sat there like an itch I couldn't scratch, each image a frozen testament to something I didn't fully understand, but feared was bigger than I wanted to admit. Emma came downstairs freshly showered, the scent of her floral shampoo wafting through the kitchen. She hummed softly to herself, a casual melody that made me feel like I was living in two different realities. Hers carefree and oblivious, and mine heavy with suspicion. "Pancakes?" she asked with a grin, noticing the stack I'd made for the kids. "Yeah," I muttered, forcing a smile. "Figured they deserved a treat." She poured herself a cup of coffee, oblivious to the storm brewing inside me. I watched her, wondering how someone could seem so normal, so composed, when just hours ago I'd seen messages that hinted at betrayal. Was I overreacting? Blowing things out of proportion? But then those words echoed in my mind again. Unfinished business. After breakfast, I told Emma I had some work to catch up on and retreated to my home office. The truth was, I wasn't getting any work done that morning. I sat at my desk, phone in hand, scrolling through the screenshots for the 100th time, dissecting every word, every punctuation mark, looking for hidden meanings. Ryan had always been just a name from Emma's past, someone she mentioned occasionally, but without much significance. Or so I thought. They dated briefly in college, right before she and I met. According to Emma, it had been a whirlwind romance that fizzled out when life pulled them in different directions. But now I wondered if it had ever truly fizzled out, or if it had just been put on pause, waiting for the right moment to reignite. I opened my laptop and did something I never thought I'd do. I looked him up. Ryan Daniels. His social media profiles were easy to find, and it didn't take long to piece together a picture of who he was now. He lived a few towns over, worked as a marketing executive, and still had the rugged, boyish charm that probably made high school girls swoon. His profile was littered with pictures of hiking trips, beach vacations, and the occasional motivational quote about seizing the moment. A knot formed in my stomach as I scrolled through his photos. There was nothing inherently incriminating about him, but just knowing he had wormed his way back into Emma's life made my blood boil. I closed the laptop, leaning back in my chair. This wasn't just about Ryan. This was about Emma, and the fact that she hadn't told me any of this. The secrecy was what stung the most. The texts themselves weren't explicit, but they danced dangerously close to a line I wasn't comfortable with. "Ryan, so when's our coffee date?" "I'm holding you to that, you know." Emma. "Haha, you don't give up, do you?" Ryan. "Never did with you, remember?" My jaw clenched. I needed to confront her, but I didn't know how without coming off like a paranoid, insecure husband. What if it really was just harmless banter? What if I accused her of something that wasn't even happening and drove a wedge between us unnecessarily? The kids played outside in the yard, their laughter drifting through the open window. I watched them for a moment, torn between the desire to protect our family and the fear of shattering it with my suspicions. That evening, Emma sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone while I pretended to watch TV. My mind raced with questions I couldn't bring myself to ask. "You okay?" she asked, glancing up from her screen. "Yeah," I said too quickly. She tilted her head, studying me. "You've been weird all day. What's going on?" I hesitated, my heart pounding. This was my chance. I could lay it all out, ask her point blank about Ryan, about the texts, about what unfinished business really meant. But fear held me back. "Just work stuff," I lied. She frowned but didn't press further. That night, as she slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling, my thoughts tangled and messy. I couldn't keep living like this, trapped between doubt and denial. The next morning, I made a decision. If I couldn't confront Emma directly, I needed more information. I wasn't proud of it, but I justified it by telling myself that I deserved to know the truth. While Emma was out running errands, I accessed her email from the shared tablet in the living room. We didn't have secrets when it came to passwords, or at least we hadn't until now. I searched for anything related to Ryan. There it was, an email thread with the subject line, "Coffee Catch-Up"? My stomach dropped as I opened it. The email thread wasn't long, but each message hit like a sucker punch. Ryan, hey, just checking in to see if you're free next week. I owe you that coffee date. Emma, haha, you're persistent. Let me check my schedule and get back to you. Ryan, I like to think persistence is a virtue. The timestamps were recent, just a few days ago. I clenched my jaw, my thumb hovering over the screen, as if hesitation would change what I was seeing. These weren't just harmless conversations anymore. They were coordinated attempts at meeting up, deliberate steps towards something I wasn't sure I wanted to define. What was coffee anyway? A simple, innocent meetup? Or the gateway to something worse? I told myself it was nothing. Coffee didn't have to mean betrayal. But then I thought of the context, the slippery slope that had already formed in their texts, the teasing tone, the nostalgic reminiscing, the casual what-ifs. All of it pointed to something more dangerous than caffeine and small talk. The words "unfinished business" echoed in my head like a warning bell. I paced the living room, fighting the urge to throw the tablet across the room. Anger simmered under the surface, battling with the fear gnawing at my insides. I wanted to believe Emma was better than this, better than sneaking around, better than betraying the life we'd built together. But the evidence was mounting, and I couldn't ignore it any longer. The sound of the front door opening jolted me out of my thoughts. Emma walked in, balancing a couple of grocery bags in her arms. Her face lit up when she saw me, completely unaware of the emotional minefield I was navigating. "Hey," she greeted cheerfully. "I got those snacks the kids like. Figured we could do a movie night." I forced a smile, my voice strained. "Sounds good." She set the bags down on the counter and began unpacking them, humming softly to herself. I watched her, searching for signs of guilt or deception. But Emma was an enigma, calm and collected as always. "You sure you're okay?" she asked, glancing over her shoulder. "Yeah," I lied. She frowned but didn't push further. That evening, as the kids watched a movie, Emma curled up next to me on the couch. Her head rested on my shoulder, her presence warm and familiar. I wanted to lose myself in that moment, to pretend that everything was fine. But the weight of the unanswered questions pressed down on me, suffocating. The next morning, I woke up determined to get answers. I couldn't keep living in this limbo, torn between suspicion and denial. Emma was in the kitchen, sipping her coffee as sunlight streamed through the window. Her hair was messy from sleep, and there was a peacefulness about her that made my chest ache. "Hey," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Morning," she replied with a smile. "Want some coffee?" "No, I'm good." She raised an eyebrow. "Since when do you turn down coffee?" I shrugged, avoiding her gaze. My heart pounded in my chest as I searched for the right words. "I need to ask you something," I said finally. Her expression shifted, curiosity flickering in her eyes. "Okay, what's up?" I took a deep breath, bracing myself. "Have you been talking to Ryan?" The question hung in the air, heavy and unspoken truths lingering between us. Emma blinked, surprise registering on her face. "Ryan? From the reunion?" "Yeah." She hesitated, setting her mug down on the counter. "Why are you asking?" "Because I saw the texts," I admitted, my voice low but steady. "And the emails. I know you've been talking to him." Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Emma sighed, crossing her arms over her chest. "Look, it's not what you think." "Then what is it?" I demanded, frustration bubbling to the surface. "Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you've been sneaking around with your ex." Her eyes narrowed. "Sneaking around? Seriously? It's just coffee, Adam." "Is it?" I shot back. "Because from those messages, it sounds like a hell of a lot more than coffee." Emma's jaw tightened. "You're reading too much into this. Ryan and I have history, yes, but that's all it is. History. I was just catching up with an old friend." "An old friend who called you the one who got away?" She flinched, and I knew I'd hit a nerve. "You don't understand," she said quietly. "Then explain it to me," I challenged. "Because right now, all I see is you lying to me." Emma ran a hand through her hair, frustration etched across her face. "I didn't tell you because I knew you'd react like this." "React like what?" I demanded. Like a husband who doesn't want his wife getting coffee with some guy who still has feelings for her? Her silence was deafening. I took a step back, my chest heaving. If it's really nothing, then why hide it? Emma looked away, guilt flickering in her eyes. I don't know, she admitted softly. Maybe I just miss that part of myself. The girl who was carefree and wild. Ryan reminded me of that. Her words cut deeper than any confession of infidelity ever could. So what now? I asked bitterly. You keep chasing the past while I sit here, wondering if my wife's still in love with her ex? Emma's eyes filled with tears. It's not like that. Then what is it like? She didn't have an answer. The rest of the morning passed in strained silence. Emma went through the motions, getting the kids ready, tidying up the living room, and making small talk when necessary. But the air between us was thick with unspoken words. I knew I should have pressed her further, demanded a clearer explanation, but part of me was too exhausted to keep fighting. I retreated to the garage, my usual refuge when life got overwhelming. The familiar scent of sawdust and motor oil greeted me as I stepped inside. My half-finished woodworking project, a coffee table I'd been building for weeks, stood in the center of the room, its surface smooth but incomplete. I ran my hand along the grain of the wood, seeking comfort in the tactile simplicity of creation. Unlike my marriage, this project had clear steps, predictable outcomes. Measure, cut, sand, assemble. If only relationships were that straightforward. Emma's words echoed in my mind. Maybe I just missed that part of myself. It wasn't a confession of infidelity, but it felt dangerously close. What did it say about our life together if she longed for a version of herself that didn't include me? A sharp knock on the garage door interrupted my thoughts. Emma stood there, her expression unreadable. Can we talk? She asked softly. I nodded, wiping my hands on a rag. Yeah. We sat on a pair of old folding chairs near the workbench, the weight of the conversation pressing down on us. I know you're hurt, Emma began, her voice tentative, and I get why, but I need you to understand, it wasn't about you. I let out a bitter laugh. That's supposed to make me feel better? I'm serious, Adam, she insisted. This thing with Ryan, it was never about replacing you or anything like that. I wasn't looking for something new. I don't know how to explain it. Try, I said flatly. She sighed, rubbing her temples. When I saw him at the reunion, it brought back all these memories, not just of him, but of who I was back then. Before the mortgage, the school drop-offs, the endless to-do lists. I guess I got swept up in it. So you decided to sneak around and have coffee with him? Her face flushed. It wasn't sneaking around. I didn't tell you because I knew you'd react like this. Maybe you should have trusted me enough to have the conversation anyway, I shot back. Emma flinched, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. I made a mistake, she admitted quietly, but I didn't cheat on you, Adam. I swear I wanted to believe her, desperately, but the cracks in our foundation had already formed, and no amount of reassurance could patch them up overnight. What about unfinished business? I asked, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. What does that mean? Emma's brows knit together in confusion. What are you talking about? The texts, I said, my voice rising. He said something about unfinished business between you two. Care to explain? Realization dawned on her face, followed by a flash of anger. You read my text? You didn't exactly leave me much choice, I countered. What was I supposed to do when I saw you hiding things from me? Emma stood up, pacing the small space. This is exactly why I didn't tell you, because you go straight to worst-case scenario. Can you blame me? I demanded. What am I supposed to think when my wife is meeting up with her ex and talking about unfinished business? Emma stopped pacing, her shoulders slumping. It wasn't what you think. He was talking about some dumb inside joke we had back in college. It didn't mean anything. I wanted to believe her, but doubt gnawed at the edges of my mind. Was she telling the truth or just saying what she thought I wanted to hear? I need time, I said finally, my voice hollow. Emma's eyes filled with tears. Time for what? To figure out where we go from here. She nodded slowly, biting her lip to keep it from trembling. Okay. As she walked back toward the house, I felt a strange mixture of relief and sadness. We had reached a crossroads, and I wasn't sure which path we would take. Later that night, as I lay awake in bed, I thought about the life we had built together. The laughter, the struggles, the quiet moments of joy. Was it all worth saving? Could we rebuild what had been broken, or were we destined to drift further apart? I didn't have the answers yet, but one thing was clear. The truth, whatever it was, would reveal itself in time. The days that followed were a blur of awkward silences and unspoken tension. Emma and I moved through the house like strangers, careful not to cross paths more than necessary. The kids, thankfully oblivious to the turmoil brewing beneath the surface, carried on with their usual routines of school, homework, and chaotic playtime. But inside, I was unraveling. I couldn't stop replaying our conversation in the garage, dissecting every word and searching for hidden meanings. Was Emma telling the truth about Ryan, or was she just trying to cover her tracks? The uncertainty gnawed at me, making it impossible to think about anything else. One evening, after the kids had gone to bed, Emma approached me in the living room. She hesitated at the edge of the couch, as if unsure whether she was welcome. "Can we talk?" she asked softly. I nodded, though my chest tightened at the thought of another heavy conversation. Emma sat down, folding her hands in her lap. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she began, her voice steady but tinged with vulnerability. "About us, about what happened." I didn't say anything, waiting for her to continue. "I know I hurt you," she admitted, "and I take full responsibility for that. I should have been honest with you from the beginning. I should have trusted you enough to tell you about Ryan." I swallowed hard, the lump in my throat making it difficult to speak. "Why didn't you?" she sighed, looking down at her hands. "Because I was scared, not of you, but of what it meant for me. Seeing Ryan made me realize how much I've changed since college, and not all of it in ways I'm proud of. I guess I wanted to hold on to that part of myself for just a little longer." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I had spent so much time focusing on my own pain that I hadn't considered what Emma might be going through. "Why didn't you come to me?" I asked quietly. "I don't know," she admitted, her voice breaking. "I should have. You're my partner, and I should have trusted you to understand." Silence hung between us, heavy with regret and unspoken questions. "I never cheated on you," Emma said firmly, meeting my gaze. "I need you to know that. Whatever feelings I had about reconnecting with my past, they never crossed that line." I wanted to believe her, desperately, but trust, once broken, wasn't easy to rebuild. "I don't know where we go from here," I admitted, my voice raw, "but I know I don't want to lose you." Tears welled up in Emma's eyes. "I don't want to lose you either." For the first time in weeks, a glimmer of hope flickered between us. It was fragile, tentative, but it was there. Over the next few months, we worked on rebuilding our relationship. It wasn't easy. There were still moments of doubt and insecurity, times when the past threatened to overshadow our progress. But we were committed to moving forward together. Counseling helped. So did honest conversations, the kind that left us raw but brought us closer in the end. Emma deleted Ryan's contact information and blocked him on every platform, a symbolic but meaningful gesture that showed me she was serious about putting our marriage first. More importantly, we both made a conscious effort to reconnect, not just as parents or partners, but as individuals who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. Date nights, spontaneous adventures, and quiet moments of laughter became the glue that held us together. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Emma took my hand in hers. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" I asked, surprised. "For not giving up on us," she said, "even when I gave you every reason to." I squeezed her hand, emotion tightening my throat. "You didn't give me every reason," I corrected gently. "You gave me a reason to fight for us." The road ahead wasn't perfect. No marriage ever is. But for the first time in a long while, I felt confident that we could weather whatever storms came our way. Because love, at its core, wasn't about perfection. It was about choosing each other, day after day, even when it was hard, especially when it was hard. And that was a choice I was willing to make. A year had passed since the day everything nearly fell apart. Life, as it always does, moved on. But Emma and I were different, stronger, more intentional, and painfully aware of how close we had come to losing each other. The journey back hadn't been easy. Trust doesn't return overnight. It's earned slowly and deliberately through 1,000 little actions. Emma and I learned that the hard way. Our marriage counseling sessions continued for months after that night in the garage. They were uncomfortable at first, full of raw confessions and awkward silences, but eventually they became a safe space where we could be honest without fear of judgment. Emma opened up about the identity crisis she'd been grappling with since becoming a wife and mother. I admitted to my own failures, the times I had taken her presence for granted, assuming she'd always be the same woman I married. We weren't just healing, we were evolving. One sunny Saturday, we returned to our college town for a spontaneous day trip. It was Emma's idea, a bold move considering the memories tied to that place. We wandered through the cobblestone streets, past familiar coffee shops and lecture halls, laughing at how much smaller everything seemed now. Standing under the massive oak tree where we had once shared our first kiss as students, Emma turned to me with a smile that was both nostalgic and hopeful. "This is where it all started," she said softly, her fingers laced with mine. I nodded, the weight of our shared history settling comfortably between us. And this is where we chose each other. Again. That trip marked a turning point. We stopped looking back at what could have been and focused on what was yet to come. There were still challenges, of course. Marriage is never perfect, just perfectly worth it. But every disagreement, every tough conversation, was now met with a shared commitment to understand rather than blame. Emma started painting again, something she hadn't done since college. The canvases that filled our living room were vibrant and chaotic, filled with colors that seemed to mirror her rediscovered joy. I continued woodworking, turning our garage into a creative haven where we often worked side by side, lost in our respective crafts. One evening, as the kids slept upstairs, we sat together on the back porch. The stars above flickered like scattered diamonds, and the cool night air wrapped around us like a blanket. "You ever think about Ryan?" I asked cautiously, surprising even myself with the question. Emma didn't flinch. Instead, she smiled gently, the kind of smile that spoke volumes about where we were now. "No," she said simply. "He was a reminder, not a temptation. You're the one I choose, Adam, every day." And I believed her, because love isn't about never making mistakes. It's about owning them, learning from them, and choosing to move forward together. As I looked at Emma, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the porch light, I felt an overwhelming sense of gratitude. We had been tested, bent, but not broken. And now we were finally home.